Welcome to our blog. So this is the first one we've done where we're looking to meet a series of Hampshire sporting icons, and I have the pleasure of introducing Freddie Carr today, who's had a long, very successful career on the water, and most recently has joined Team Ineos alongside Sir Ben Ainsley, who is launching their challenge for the 36th America's Cup. So welcome, David, and thank you for your time joining us.
Nice, Kris. Thanks for having me along, mate.
Good stuff. So when you were a youngster, when you were bobbing around on the south coast of England, did you ever think you'd be where you are now at the very, very pinnacle of the sport?
No, not at all. I grew up in Alresford, just outside Winchester. And so obviously not that close to the sea. And I was one of those kids that did every sport. My mum and dad got me into every sport. I had so much energy. And the sport that I kind of naturally took to when I was about 10 years old was sailing. We'd go down to Hayling Island Sailing Club. And the thing that I loved about it was just the freedom that it'd give me. I could push off the beach in a little dinghy and go and basically do proper Swallows and Amazons style adventures as a 10-year-old. And that sense of freedom really stood out to me. And then I guess over the course of my teenage years, I got more and more enthused with the racing side of things. And then when I went and met you at Exeter University and the racing side of things really clicked, and I started winning sort of youth world championships and student world championships. But even then, I didn't think it would lead to sort of a 20-year career now in the America's Cup. So I still have to pinch myself, I must say. Very lucky.
Yeah, fantastic. I know you're still gutted you're not playing for Arsenal. Wasn't that the
dream? Yeah, I mean, I think the sailing came along at just the perfect time, because I was getting found out in hockey and rugby and football that I don't think I would ever have worn the nation's colours in other sports. But I mean, like everyone involved in the industry, Kris, just feel extremely lucky to earn a living off my hobby. And you never know. I'm 38 now. Maybe I'll give up sailing and have another crack at the football.
Good stuff. And what's life like as a professional sportsman with Ben Ainsley in the team?
Kris, it's changed beyond belief. When I rolled out and I did my first America's Cup in 2003, so just after we graduated. That makes me feel old now, mate. And the sport was wildly different. It was, I would suggest, very similar to rugby in the mid-90s when they were going through the switch of going to professionalism. So I think I've lived in a bubble in that period of sailing where we have gone from semi-pro, amateur to semi-pro, and now where we are with Ineos, being under the Ineos sports umbrella, being aligned with the Ineos Grenadiers, and Eliud Kipchoge doing his sub-2-hour marathon. We've gone from sort of semi-pro levels to what I consider to be probably right up there in terms of the highest levels of human performance and high performance living. And now at the age of 38, that's been perfect timing for me to kind of in the last 10 years as the sun's going down in my career, to really click into that high performance lifestyle and try and keep up with the young guys. But it comes with its challenges as like life stresses and having a family and having kids. It's a very different balancing act to the sort of lads in their mid-20s that we're now kind of seeing coming through into professional sport, much like you're seeing young guys in Tour de France. This whole, they've just lived from the age of their mid-teens. They're so super focused and they live this high performance lifestyle with one end goal. And it's amazing to see that. But for a guy who has had a foot in both generations of professional sailing, it takes a bit of getting used to that. Not everybody wants to roll out to the pub on a Friday night. They'd rather go out, roll out on their bikes and do another 2 hours of training. So yeah, it's a funny one.
So you mentioned there about the team behind you a little bit as well. So can you explain how many guys are actually in the boat, and then how big is that team behind supporting what you guys are doing?
Yeah, so Ineos Team UK, as you mentioned at the top, we are going down to New Zealand to race in the America's Cup just after Christmas. Great Britain's never won the America's Cup. We lost it in 1851, so 170 years ago. And in my opinion, sort of being a patriotic sportsman, it's the only major sporting trophy, and it's the oldest sporting trophy in the world that Great Britain's never won. So we've assembled a team of about 140 people here, of which 16 are in the sailing team. Now, on our 70-foot boat, 11 of us will sail at one time. And then the other guys are some kind of substitutes and reserves. And then of the other makeup of that 140, we'd have like 40 designers, another 60 shore crew, which is kind of like the pit guys that look after the boat. And the rest sort of 20 or so are support staff. And in amongst that support staff is our head of human performance, our nutritionalist, our physio, and yeah, so we're and our S&C coach, mustn't forget Pinky. So we're really well looked after for a squad of 16 guys to kind of have that level of support to kind of live in this high performance environment. We there's no excuses basically for us.
Great stuff. It's a huge investment, obviously, of time and people to get you guys to be successful. So it's good to hear you've got that behind you. So the guys that are on the boat, and maybe if you could explain a little bit about the different roles with the different members on the boat, and then your role specifically.
Yeah, sure. So we sail with 11 people, and fundamentally 3 of those guys have a jolly nice day out sailing. So we have a guy, the best sailor that's ever lived, so I shouldn't call him a guy, but Ben drives the boat, and he's obviously the driving force between where we are here with Ineos Team UK, but in the previous America's Cup when we're out in Bermuda, sponsored by Land Rover. And so Ben drives the boat, and he's the skipper, and he's the head of the campaign. We then have one guy who's in charge of the sails. So he's what we call a trimmer, and he's like almost like a throttle guy. So he's in charge of the power that's going into the boat for Ben to use to drive. And then the third guy who has a really nice day sailing, which is revolutionary in the sport nowadays, is the pilot. Now, Kris, sort of 10 years ago, boats would have looked very normal to anyone going down onto the foreshore in Hampshire, and you'd see boats chugging along at about 10 miles an hour. But the biggest step the America's Cup's made in the last 10 years is the boats are now flying out of the water. We call it foiling. And they basically do 4 times the speed of the wind. So the boats can go up to 50 miles an hour. And our pilot on board the boat is the guy who's in charge of the things, the foils that are in the water to lift the boat out of the water and get them going as fast as possible. So that leaves 8 guys. And those 8 guys are what we call grinders. And you're fundamentally cycling with your arms for 40 minutes by grinding like this. And it's, it is cycling with your arms for 40 minutes. You're moving the winches on board the boat that move the sails, and you're moving a hydraulic pump, which helps move the sails dynamically to get the boat going as fast as possible. And you'll also have, each grinder has a specific part of the boat to control, to contribute to get the boat going as fast as possible. So not only for that 40-minute race are you working sort of at the top end of your threshold of your heart rate into sort of level 5, but you've also got to kind of stay switched on and completely dialed in cognitively to kind of read your displays and read how the boat is sailing, to input into the boat to get it going as fast as possible. So it's a real nice balance where you're not just going flat out for 40 minutes at max heart rate trying to move as much oil as possible. You've actually got to stay completely dialed in with the rest of the crew and the environment and the racing surroundings to get the boat ticking along. So there's quite a lot of, I guess, sort of mental fortitude in there as well as being able to operate at a really, really high heart rate.
So I'm really interested by the communication aspect, because if you've got that number of guys on the boat, traveling at potentially 50 miles an hour, which is an obscene speed across water, in windy conditions, treacherous conditions. So how do you communicate effectively, or what training methods do you have for communication?
Yeah, so we all have a bunch of safety gear, including like helicopter spare air, life jackets, as you'd imagine, helmets, and built into our helmets is a communication pack, because you can imagine the noise of the boat is really, really loud. So everybody, all 11 sailors on the boat, have an earpiece and a mouthpiece, and the key players on the boat, so be it Ben, be it Giles Scott, the tactician, who's sort of Olympic gold medalist from Rio, or the trimmer or the pilot, are on open mic. So whatever they say is get transmitted to the whole crew. And then the other 8 of us, the other 7 of us in this case, have a push to talk. So you have a little button, and if you've got something that's really important for everyone to hear, then you can push to talk and communicate that bit of information, and then turn yourself back off. But like all sports, Kris, like you feel like you're sailing well and you're racing well when you actually don't need to communicate that much. Like once a process is set off to be, let's say, a tack or a jibe or a certain racing maneuver, Ben will say, okay, standby tack, 3, 2, 1, tacking. And then it sets off the series of events where if you're maneuvering the boat well, there needs to be very little communication at all. I guess where over the sort of 20 years, again, that I've seen the biggest change is communication is from the race boats back to the engineers who follow us on shore and in a rib. So everything that we're saying on board the boat is getting communicated to a chase boat that's following us with all the clever people in looking at the data. So there's a live conversation between the designers and the sailors whilst we're sailing to get the boat to go faster. And also everybody sitting back in shore, in this case for us in Portsmouth, all the designers can sit in mission control and watch us sailing live and listen to us sailing. So by the time we come back ashore, they've already processed the data, and we sit down and have a debrief and try and make the boat go faster the next day. So yeah, the communication system is really important.
That's very impressive, and quite similar to the Formula One. I think setup. It sounds like.
Yeah, I mean we're aligned in with since Ineos have come on board and have put their foot into Formula One with Mercedes. We do a fair bit of work with Mercedes Sports, and it's we've been able to pick their brains with a few things, and they've kind of looked at how we operate and we look at how they operate, and we've kind of shared a good few ideas on how we can make our sort of data learning more efficient, I guess you could say.
Fantastic stuff. So you mentioned the America's Cup, which obviously doesn't happen every year, and I appreciate there's other sailing events that you'll be taking place in, but how do you stay at the peak of performance, or do you build up throughout the season to an event, and how's that structured?
So it's, as you said, it's kind of every 4 years traditionally, so much like an Olympic cycle. And I guess in terms of physicality, I came out the back of the last America's Cup, and I was, to be honest, we came out of Bermuda in 2017, and I was absolutely fried. I was fried physically and mentally from the effort. I'd spent the weight limit on that America's Cup class boat was quite a bit lower than it is currently. So I spent a lot of time trying to maintain what was an unnatural low body weight for me. I was sitting around 90 kilos, where most of my adult life, probably since leaving university, I've sat at 100 kilos. So I was kind of sitting 8 to 10 kilos under where I would normally operate. So I was getting sick quite a bit more. But fundamentally, you can't maintain that level of push, that level of training intensity, that level of focus for 4 years. So I had sort of 18 months where I would just dip in and out of training. Did kind of on the bike rather than grinding. Did a whole bunch of different sailing and just hit the reset really. And that means that when I got back into a sort of attacking this America's Cup 18 months, 2 years ago, I was ready to go. I was ready to get back to the push. Now, the hard thing is what all the physical standards you'd set yourself in the previous cycle, and the first 6 months of reloading is absolutely heinous, because in fact, I got to the point where I was grinding on the grinding machine, and much like a cycling machine, it has your wattages and that kind of stuff. And for the first 6 months, I would just tape up the wattage because I didn't want to see how much I'd lost. Basically, I'd be training off my heart rate zones. And for 6 months, I knew I'd get so frustrated if I was trying to compare myself to what I used to be, that I would probably just have a complete meltdown. So for 6 months, I just reloaded and listened to podcasts and that side of things. So yeah, and other than that, our head of human performance, a guy called Ben Williams, is done a really good job, as he did previously, in just breaking down our cycle into 6-week blocks. So you've always got the end in sight. We physically test once a quarter, so four fitness tests a year. And we're just really, as a group, we're kind of really open with our sessions, with our numbers. It's a very encouraging environment. We try to develop a culture where, although like the fittest guys are going to go racing, we're trying to get everyone to a very high level. And it is kind of the strength of the 16, not the strength of the 11. But that's quite hard to manage. It's much like a rowing team. I'd have thought, like, the 8 fittest guys are going to get on the boat and row in that Olympic final, but there'll be 12 guys trying to get the spot and push each other on. So trying to maintain a good team environment also whilst you're trying to beat each other is quite tricky. So that's been a bit of a challenge, but it's been a good, physically, and in terms of the support we have, in terms of access to sort of physios, injuries, that kind of stuff has been second to none.
And so you mentioned there about being, obviously, you are a hugely competitive guy, probably the most competitive with yourself, I would imagine, in terms of pushing on and on and on. So if you do get an injury, obviously you're very well looked after with the team in terms of getting you back on track. But how do you deal with that almost mentally, in terms of knowing you have to almost work at a certain percentage and not wanting to push on, being that competitive guy you are?
Yeah, do you know, that's a great question to ask, because I'm actually carrying a bit of a niggle at the moment. In 2012, I was sailing for the Italian team, Luna Rossa, and I did my AC joint. I at the very start of signing a contract with them, I sprained my AC joint, and I was, how old would I have been then? 30. And it was at the beginning of the season, and I really wanted to make a mark in the team and put a marker down as being one of the key sailors there. So I put a cortisone shot into that shoulder. And although it got me through the sailing season that year in 2012, and we had a good year, we won the season within the America's Cup World Series, it's my shoulder ever since has not been right, my right shoulder. And then just with the sheer volume of grinding that we've done over the last 5 or 6 years, I've just been sort of acutely aware that I'm kind of losing a bit of strength and structural integrity to that shoulder. So about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I went for an MRI on it, and I'm just kind of losing. I've got a sort of degeneration of my rotator cuff tendon, and my bicep tendon is sitting slightly out of line. And it's quite tough, because it's one of those things. It's not an injury that you get from an impact. It's not an injury you get from a fall. It's a injury of overuse and, let's say, old age. And I'm pretty rigorous with my prehab. So I'm a strong believer in, I don't ever want to do rehab. I'd rather do prehab and not get injured. And I buy into that philosophy so hard. It's worth sort of the half an hour to 40 minutes every day of my life to invest into band work and sort of scapular strength around the back. But there you go. I got injured, and it's the first time I've been injured for about 8 years, and I've really, really struggled. I've really struggled with it mentally, to watch the rest of the lads go in and do sessions where they're all grinding together and pushing hard, and you're over in the physio area moving elastic bands around, trying not to get your shoulders to crunch. But it's important to have. I've got a really nice sort of 8-week rehabilitation program. So I have kind of weekly goals of that, and that's a big thing, being able to tick off weekly goals and basically see the bigger picture that the racing's not for another 6 months. See it as an opportunity to actually get out on the road bike, do a bit of running, do a bit of rowing, just mix up the stimulus a bit, and hopefully we'll be back in sort of 6 weeks stronger than when I left, because I'll have reset my shoulder effectively. But yeah, it's quite hard not being in that training group, I reckon.
Yeah. But you're doing absolutely the right thing in terms of setting it stronger for the future, which will be really, as the months go on, they'll get even more critical that maintains the integrity. So good stuff.
That's right.
So moving slightly outside the boat and the training now, can you tell us a little bit about the charity work that you do on behalf of the team?
Yeah, sure. So I'm an ambassador for the 1851 Trust, which is the charity that runs alongside the team, and the 1851 Trust is a charity that it's like a two-pronged attack. It focuses on STEM subjects within secondary school, so science, technology, engineering and maths, and tries to bring those subjects alive to secondary school kids through fun, through sport, through something they can engage with. And I'm sure, Kris, as you growing up, going through secondary school, quite a lot of those subjects were portrayed in ways that didn't really engage me. And what the Trust does is it's put educational packages together where to learn about biology, for example, they will talk the class and they'll do a term on fueling an athlete and that side of things. So if you're a young lad there that's engaged in sport and engaged in fitness but not really engaged in biology, all of a sudden the biology is getting explained to you in terms of something you can relate to, and the penny might drop. And I think it's really good. The other thing they've done incredibly well is their online resource since the global pandemic and we went into lockdown. The online resource of what they've rolled out is fantastic, and the reach that it's got into across the secondary schools in the country has been brilliant. And the second prong of it is getting kids out sailing, and that's the thing I'm probably more interested in is going up into schools and areas where you wouldn't traditionally associate with sailing or having the opportunity to go sailing. And through the charity, like I do a lot of stuff with schools in North London with a demographic that would never have the opportunity to go sailing. And it's not just a let's go sailing once, get some nice pictures and everyone's had a nice day out. It's a 10-week sailing course where at the end of it, you get your sort of RYA level 1. So your very first tick on the ladder, like your equivalent of a 400-meter swimming badge after 10 weeks. And I love the fact that you show up to these reservoirs in North London and all the kids are absolutely full of themselves, brash young kids. And it's great to see that energy. And they're rattling around, not really listening to anyone. And then you put them into a boat out in the middle of a reservoir and they just say nothing. They're absolutely petrified. So you break them right down to where, I guess, to the point where they're not that comfortable with their environment. And from that point, building their skill base back up and building their confidence and teamwork and communication back up through sailing over a 10-week period. And then at the end of it, they're fully confident in what they're doing. They've learned to sail, but that's the kind of byproduct of learning how to work well within the team, how to believe in their skill base, how to think about their boat preparation and how to get all that kind of stuff done. And that's hugely rewarding to see that. And if after those 10 weeks they never sail again, I hope that they sort of learn to take on to for future education is the goal. But a good few of them love it and go on to do their next couple of badges and are still sailing today. It's cool.
Cool. That sounds like a great initiative. And like you said, it's not just a one hit to get some nice photos and put on social media. If they get something they can take with them on a longer course, and that's fantastic. Just got two more quick questions.
Sure, fire away.
So, in terms of, you mentioned about getting kids out sailing. So one thing we want to encourage for any of the patients we see and the local communities, getting people active, getting people out there doing any sport, or at least trying sports. So what would be your advice for someone that hasn't tried sailing to take the first steps into getting into it?
I mean, it's just so easy to do. There's so many preconceptions that sailing is for the privileged, and that's probably not too far from the mark. Sort of 20 or 30 years ago, you did need to live by the sea. You did need to have the opportunity to get in the boat, and I feel lucky that I had those opportunities. But that's just not the case now. I could look at the Andrew Simpson Sailing Foundation, which is a sailing centre in Portsmouth, about 2 miles away. And you can, the summer just gone, or sorry, the summer before that, because of COVID, you could sign up for the same 10-week sailing course that you could do through the trust for like £75 for 10 weeks sailing. And yes, that is a fair bit of money, but you look at the cost of a pair of trainers, or that's going to be the price of FIFA 21 for most kids. Do you know what I mean? It's all relatively now, and you get all the equipment, all the safety training, all the learning. And it's just a case of kind of having the hunger and the get up and go to get out and do it. And I think what I saw in the lockdown early on, and I'm sure you're the same, Kris, because you kind of brought up with that sports science, health and exercise mindset, is I just loved seeing the best thing that came out of lockdown was the nation, to me, got exercising. And it was walking, it was bike riding, it was running, it was just kicking a football around the park where it was safe to do so, socially distancing. And halfway through lockdown, when there wasn't a car on the roads, but there was thousands of bikes around the South Downs, and you'd see older generations out walking. And I just hope I think there's still a bit of a trickle over from that now, but I just hope that people can recognize how good that was for us as a nation to get that physically active, and can see the value in their quality of life out the back of that as well, and see that just nothing bad comes of getting out there and getting active,
Yeah, absolutely agree. It's really great seeing you. Just hope that absolutely continues for the nation. So final question then. Obviously, you've had a very illustrious career, hugely successful. What do you think you'd like your legacy to be?
God, what's my legacy going to be? That's a great question. No one has ever asked me that. I guess I see myself now sort of as a senior sailor, and I don't think I've necessarily had a long and good career at the top of the game by being the most talented in the world at all. I think I had a good bit of talent. Like I wouldn't have won the regattas when I was a nipper without having it. But I think more than anything, I place really high value on two things. I think being a good teammate and being able to work within a group, and being a good friend, a good listener, a good leader where I need to be, I put as a really high value, leading by example. And I'd also think work ethic, it's all too easy not to work hard. And if you really work hard and knuckle down and lead by example with your work ethic, I think you'll have a good career in any sport, and it's not necessarily about talent. I'm about to get this quote wrong, but something around like sort of limited talent working hard outdoes talent that isn't working, or something like that. But you know what I'm trying to get at. And I've just always worked hard. And I think I guess the other thing is just chatting to people and talking to people. It's all too easy to live life via WhatsApp or email or the such like, or on Microsoft Teams, but actually to go and talk to your teammates and have a bit of FaceTime, I think is the most important thing. Be a good mate to everyone.
Good advice. Okay, fantastic. Well, look, thank you very much again for taking the time to join us. And on behalf of Winchester Wellness, we'd like to wish you and the entire Ineos Team UK, best of luck for the America's Cup. And we really look forward to you bringing that cup home in the new year.
Nice, Kris. Nice one, mate.
Thank you, buddy.
Yeah, no worries. Take it easy.